Hey, it's Scott Petrak with another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. We can argue about whether the Browns should be 5-0, 4-1, or 3-2, but they are disappointing 2-3 after a loss to the Chargers on Sunday. Bill Belichick and the Patriots are coming to town next as Cleveland's coaching staff tries to right the ship. Here to break it all down with me, as usual, is Dave Chudowsky of the WKYC Morning News. How's it going, Chud?
Scott, I'm well. I just have to say, put another chapter in the book of Browns. I mean, it really is. It's quite the read, isn't it?
Yeah, and a lot of chapters end really poorly and badly with disappointment.
Yeah. Yeah, you spurred a thought in my head when you said that of what their record could be. I mean, it is really amazing the fine line of what their record could be because all these games have been close, right? And
Yep.
they have had a chance to win them all. Haven't they had the lead in the fourth quarter in every game? Am I wrong about that?
No, they've started the fourth quarter with the lead in every game. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it really is, and it's just such a tough call to watch this team because they're equal parts a team that could be really, really good. And as we always talk about the talent, and you're like, well, they can hang with anyone. But at the other end, it's the other part of it's just the same old crap, and they just don't know how to win. And here we are, and I guess they are what they are.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's all depending on your point of view, right? You could say you can make an argument for 5-0 or maybe 4-1 is more realistic, but you can make an argument for 5-0, and then there's people out there to say, hey, well, they could easily be 1-4 because
Yeah.
Cade York could miss a 58-yarder in the opener. So I get that, and I do think there's some truth to the old Bill Parcells. You are what your record is. Having said that, it does feel like they're better than 2-3 to me. It feels like they've played better than that. They just haven't, and maybe it's cliche, but it certainly sounds like Kevin Stefanski talking, but they haven't been able to finish, and that's huge in this league. And I feel like the Browns have enough talent. Like I think at some point they crossed over, whether it was 2020 or it at least started there. They've crossed over to they have enough talent to win a bunch of games. And so they're no longer the bottom feeders like they were for so long, like, whoever the Chicago's of the world right now. But that means but they're not elite, right? They're not the Chiefs, they're not the Bills. So if you're in that middle ground, you got to figure out a way to win games and win close games. And that's what they're struggling to do. And in 2020, when they went to the playoffs, they were able to do it. Last year, not as much. And to this point, not as much. And that's frustrating for
So I
fans
don't
because you
want to
see
play
enough
the
talent.
blame game necessarily, but I'm gonna. Yeah, sorry there. I I don't want to play the blame game necessarily, but I would like to just bring out three factors, and I just want Petrak's position. Where do you stand as to what was the biggest problem in that game? And I'll throw out three things, and you might throw out a fourth or fifth thing. But these are the three things I'm going to throw at you. It's the Browns defense. It's Cade York, missed two field goals, including the possible game winner, and Jacoby Brissett. And mostly with him, it's just that awful
Sure.
decision that he made. Not as much his whole play, but that was just a terrible pass, in my opinion, that just really, it's just crushing. The fact that they still had a chance to win is amazing, and we'll get to all that. But kind of where do you lie on all of those?
I'd probably rank them as you said them. Defense, York, Brissett. The run defense was awful, right? 238 yards. The second straight week giving up more than 200. I thought the return of Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney would make a big difference, and it didn't. And I don't really blame them. I've rewatched much of the game, and Clowney shows up. I think Myles was fine. I don't think he was the reason they were getting killed on the run. But yet they still get killed in the run. And you could give up some yardage because you're playing coverage to stop Justin Herbert. You can't give up 238 yards, and you can't give up 200 yards 2 weeks in a row. And you let up 30 points, and that's a lot of points. So I start with the defense. Then I go to Cade York. He missed two, and he makes one, they win. Now, obviously, things could change, and the Chargers would have played differently at the end. But that's 6 points that they didn't have. and you drafted him to make those kicks. So I put the blame there. And then Jacoby Brissett, yeah, it was a terrible interception, and it cost the Browns at least 3 points, right? If we're going to blame Cade York for taking off points off the board, you got to blame Jacoby Brissett for taking points off the board. And, I don't want to kill Jacoby Brissett because I think he's played better than I expected him to. I give him a pass for the interception against the Jets because there's like 12 seconds left when he throws it. But it's 2 weeks in a row where he threw a bad pick late that cost the Browns. And this one was worse because you weren't trying to play catch up. You just needed points there. You're in position. He probably could have run. And I get it. You see Amari Cooper flash and you think, I got him. It's a touchdown. But you can't throw the pick there in the end zone. So that's how I would rank it. They're all culpable. They're all big factors in why the Browns lost that game.
Let's start with Brissett, since that was the last thing you just talked about. What was he doing on that play? Have you watched it back a bunch of times? Like I mean, just the amount of times I've watched it, I'm like, where was he going? I mean, it looked like double coverage. It's a poorly placed. What was he thinking? Like, what can you take me through that play?
Yeah, I mean, he scrambles, right? So he evades the sack. He's scrambling to his right. And if he tucks it, he might get in. He might get close to the goal line. He obviously isn't going to throw an interception if he tucks it and runs. I don't think he saw the safety that picks him. The safety said that they kind of made eye contact. I don't think Jacoby throws that ball if he really sees the safety there. But what he does see is his top receiver cutting across the back and feels like he's open. And it's such a split-second decision, right? He doesn't set his feet. He doesn't make a second look to see where anybody is. He sees a flash. He throws it. And it's just a terrible decision. And Jacoby said as much. You're giving up points. He threw back across his body, which is a terrible idea. There's obviously a bunch of bodies in the end zone, right? It's not just one guy. There's a bunch of traffic. I think he got caught up in the moment, saw something flash, and threw it. And you just have to be more disciplined than that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to figure out what he saw that flashed.
He saw Cooper. That's what he saw. He saw Amari Cooper running across the back and didn't see the Chargers in the way, right?
Yeah, when it comes to Cade York, I don't want to beat a dead horse on whether they should draft a kicker or not. I mean, because they did it. It's done. It's over with, right? I mean, we could spend time on that, but what's the point? What I want to know with him is he going to be – I mean, are we in trouble here with this guy, or do you think that he'll be okay and we're going to have a kicker here, for many years with this guy?
Right. Well, here's what's tough about it. I'm not a kicker expert, right? And even if, even if you have a quarterback struggling, you can say, I'm not the expert there either. But you watch those guys, you evaluate those guys much more than a kicker. I don't know, you know what I'm saying? It's tough to me. Okay, how did he miss this one? Was it a bad hold? Was it a bad placement? Well, did he just push it? Whatever. It's hard with a kicker. Having said that, I do like his makeup mentally, right? I like his confidence level. I like his attitude. I've talked to two of his coaches, his private coach and his coach at LSU, and they all say the right things about him and his improvement and his commitment. So, there are other kickers that the Browns have had where when they missed one, you could see the confidence shaken, and that's a troubling sign, and that's why the Browns have moved on from them quickly. I don't get the same thing from Cade York. Now, having said that, if you start missing a bunch of kicks, I don't know if anybody's immune to their confidence getting, decreasing. So it bears watching. Obviously, when you draft a guy in the 4th round, he's got a long leash. And I don't think we're close to that leash being, tight. But you got to make some kicks. And he's missed 4 kicks now, right? 2 field goals the other day, 2 extra points. His leg is huge. We're never going to argue, that's never going to be in question. And, Jacoby Brissett got asked the question, there used to be so much faith in him, right? Like you just felt like, oh my gosh, you get to within 50 yards or 55 and K Dirk's going to come in. Has that gone away? Right? The confidence that he's automatic. And Brissett said, hell no, and was good. He gave a really good answer. But I know just as an observer, that confidence is less than it was after week one. I don't know how it couldn't be. And I wonder as a coaching staff, right? Like all of a sudden, does your plan change? Now they would have, no matter who was the field goal kicker, they would have gone for a long field goal in that situation, right? I mean, that's just how the NFL is. If you get to 54 yards at the end of the game and it's fourth down, you kick a field goal. Having said that, do you play things differently? Do you go more on fourth downs? All the things that we thought would switch because of Cade York, do they switch back because he's struggling? I think it might be too early for that, but it's certainly something the Bears watch. Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit, Chud, but I'm sure you're talking about the defense in Joe Woods. And I get it. I get that that's where all the fans' frustration is. I tend to be a little more lenient on Joe Woods just because I saw him do some really good things at the end of last season. I don't know how much to blame just on scheme. I see linebackers taking bad angles and not getting off blocks. I see defensive tackles getting pushed back. I see Grant Delpit on a 71-yard run from Austin Eckler run up and is just in the wrong gap, and Eckler runs right by him. So, and when they had the breakdowns in coverage early in the season, a lot of that's player involved. So I get that the buck stops with the coaching staff. I get it. I get that that's true for Kevin Stefanski and the fact that he hired Joe Woods. I get the fact that that's Joe Woods when we talk about this defense. So I'm not taking all blame away at all. But I do think there is shared responsibility with the coaching staff and the players. And if Andrew Berry, the general manager, didn't think the players were at least partially responsible for this, he wouldn't have gone and traded for linebacker Dion Jones Sunday night. He wouldn't have signed, I think it's Tyler Davison, the veteran defensive tackle, to the practice squad on Tuesday when there's a chance he could even play Sunday, right? You can elevate him for a game and you can sign him to the 53-man roster if you want to. So maybe it took too long to figure out the weaknesses on defense, even though we've been talking about defensive tackle being a potential weakness for a long time, like since March. But Andrew Berry's obviously feels a need to upgrade the roster. And I think that is a sign that it's not all Joe Woods. But yeah, the defense isn't good enough. And, you probably were trying to say this when you're cutting in and out. The expectations were so high for this defense, and not just from guys like you and me, from them, right? They, in July and August, are talking about top 5 defense, the best defense, best secondary. And when you talk like that and play like they have, I get all the anger from fans.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I was saying. You just summed it up right there at the end. The fact that they feel like they're a great defense and it just hasn't been that. It's very frustrating. It's getting extremely annoying to watch it every week.
Yeah.
Have to say this, and sometimes when I'm watching games with all the analytics and it's just different now watching sports, right? At our age in 2022 than when we were younger. And sometimes I wonder if I've forgotten things or I haven't figured something out, or I'm like, what am I missing here? Like, what's different? What were the Chargers doing going for it there? Like, that was, I just, when it happened, I had people texting me like, what are they doing? Is this a joke? Like, what? Like, I couldn't believe that. Why did they do that?
Yeah, I'm with you. That was my reaction. And I do think part of that is, well, part of it's an age thing, right? You're just used to guys kicking punting. And we talked about that the week before with the Kevin Stefanski situations near the goal line, right? Field goal versus touchdown. But this was unusual because you're putting the other team in field goal range, right? Or awfully close to field goal range. The Browns picked up 1 first down and they tried a 54-yarder. Having said that, it's all about the data, right? well, it's not all about the data. A lot of it's about the data, which said, according to some win probability I saw on Twitter, that the win probability was better for the Chargers if they went for it versus if they punted. And that plays a role, right? And that factors in everything. It factors in how much, how many times you're going to get convert the 4th and 1, what happens on the punt, blah, 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 blah. So all that's taken into consideration. And I understand the thinking there is, hey, the probability says we're better off because we don't give up the ball, right? And that's what Brandon Staley, the Chargers coach's argument is. Hey, I wasn't going to try. It's not a trust factor thing. It's not like I don't trust my defense. It's if we don't give up the ball, we can't lose. And all I got to do is get 1 yard and the game's over. So I understand that thinking. However, in that situation, I disagree with it because I think the odds are better if you punt. Now, if I sat down with the analytics staff and they convinced me that I was wrong and that the odds are better in going for it, then I might do the same thing. But it's certainly a big change from not only how we grew up, but I mean, within the last couple of years, that's a change. And especially in that circumstance, it's way different than we ever would have expected. And, and the Browns, even the Browns, right? You hear the disrespect talk that Greg Newsom said was disrespectful, or he felt disrespected, whichever, I forget the exact phrasing, that they went for it, right? That's kind of a slap in the face to the defense. And, whatever, I think that's probably a little overblown. But there is something to be said for, hey, we didn't think they could stop us. And we thought even if they did stop us, their offense / kicker weren't gonna make us pay, right? Like that certainly factors into Brandon Staley's decision there.
I'm okay with them saying that they felt disrespected if it motivates them to stop them on that play.
Yeah.
But after the game to say it, no, I mean, come on, you don't deserve to be respected right now as a defense. So those are two different things in my opinion. But I'm not sure what the context was. But just could you imagine doing that in the Super Bowl and you lost because you didn't make it, and then the other team made the winning field goal, and that's how you had to lose the Super Bowl?
Right. Well, that's an interesting point, Chud. And you have to have such conviction as a coach to do it there, right? Because the spotlight is so intense. You're going to answer about that question forever, right? And it's like it's not the same, but it reminds me of Sean Payton onside kicking in that one Super Bowl, right? If you miss there, you get a lot of questions. But they were losing. He was looking for a spark. This is a situation where you're winning, right? You're trying to protect that lead. And, people, I don't know if people forget or not, but Bill Belichick did something similar back in the day against Peyton Manning. It was 4th and 2. Remember, they're 4th and 2, like deep in their territory. Like it was like 4th and 2 from the New England 35 against Indy. And Belichick said, we're not going to stop them. We haven't stopped them. So they went for it, got stopped. And then I think Indianapolis wins the game. I think that's how it went down. And that was a complete realization of my defense cannot stop the Colts, so we have to keep the ball. And like many things, Belichick was ahead of his time because now when most teams play the Chiefs, that's how they operate, right? You saw it Monday night. The Raiders go for it because they're like, hey, we're not going to stop them, so we need to keep the ball and we need to match them for points. So this isn't completely new, but we're obviously seeing it way more often.
Yeah, good stuff there. That is interesting when you bring up those points for sure. Had they won the game, we'd be just raving about the running game, and even in a loss, we still can. I mean, boy, Chubb looks amazing. Hunt's doing well. I mean, it's just the offense, in that aspect is rolling.
It is, and I mean, Chubb is leading the league in rushing. He looks phenomenal. I saw some stat where he's the first guy in NFL history I think the number was to get to 590 yards and 7 touchdowns in less than 100 carries in the first 5 games. So, he's averaging whatever, is it 6 yards a carry or something close. He's just doing a phenomenal job. In what you're right. What happens when you lose is then you get people saying, well, why does he only get 17 touches, right? He's averaging 6.1 yards a carry. why is he only getting 17 touches? And I get it to some degree, but my counter is they should have scored about 40 points, right? Let's forget, even if you give Cade York both field goals and Jacoby Brissett doesn't throw a pick and they kick a field goal, is even if he could have run it for a touchdown. Give them 9 more points, right? Then they score 37. That's a lot of points. They've scored a bunch of points. There's a efficiency statistic that has the Browns, I think, at number 1 overall offensively, at least number 1 in the rushing game, but I think if not number 1 in the top 5 overall offensive efficiency. My point is they're really playing well on offense. And Stefanski had some boneheaded play calls, or boneheaded might be too strong. He had some bad play calls in Atlanta, specifically inside the 5. I also didn't love the deep handoff to Kareem Hunt on 4th and 1 Sunday. Rewatched it the other day. Wyatt Teller just whiffs on a block. So who knows? Maybe the play works if Wyatt Teller doesn't whiff. But you can argue maybe they could have just quarterback sneak. Jacoby Brissett's been great at that. Whatever. Guys are going to have a bad play call here and there. My point is the offense has been marching up and down the field pretty much all year long. Stefanski's done a really good job overall as a play caller, that I am not willing to nitpick the fact that Nick Chubb only got 17 carries when the offense put up a bunch of points, had the potential to put up more points. And there is a feeling that they're trying not to wear down Nick Chubb. That's always been the feeling. That's why they have Kareem Hunt. So you could go 1-2 punch. And some of that is how the game plays out. And if the Browns are in a lot of 2-minute situations, and they were at both halves, Kareem Hunt gets more snaps. That's just how it works. Nick Chubb isn't on the field in those situations. You can argue that point, but I'm completely with the fact that Kareem Hunt should be out there. I think we've talked about this. He's a better receiver, better blocker in blitz pickup. And, we saw Nick Chubb. It wasn't a perfect throw, but he got behind Derwin James on a broken play, and it went off his hands. Now, the throw wasn't perfect. My point is Kareem Hunt, I think, makes that catch. Nick Chubb didn't. And that is an example of why Hunt's in the game in 2-minute situations and 3rd down. And sometimes if you have 2 of those in a game, two-minute drills, it's why Nick Chubb doesn't have as many snaps as maybe people would like. He still had a couple more than Hunt. But the overall point is they're using him just fine. He's having a great season. I think it's silly to nitpick that when the run game and the offense has been so successful overall.
Yeah, if I'm an NFL head coach right now and I'm in a gym and all the running backs are in there and you get first pick, I'm taking Nick Chubb right now.
Me too.
He's hot. Yeah, the guy is something to watch. Wow. Yeah. Before we get on to New England, Denzel Ward. Let's get into injuries now. How do we stand? I mean, another injury for Denzel.
Yeah, I mean, I got a hard time even, criticizing a guy when he's got a concussion, right? It happens in this league. Right. Guys miss time. I know Denzel's missed time before. It feels doubtful he'll play Sunday against New England. It's too early to tell. Obviously, the league is, especially in the last couple of weeks, feels like it's being more careful with guys. So I'm just assuming Denzel's not going to play this week. Obviously, we haven't heard that yet. But otherwise, it came out pretty clean. Clowney said his ankle, he felt his ankle, or I don't know if he used the term aggravated, but he stayed in. I think the hope is that he's over the worst of that and will continue to play. I would expect him not to practice a bunch. I think Myles Garrett is going to continue to get better. He said, he's not at 100%. I think he'll continue to get better. So they're actually, outside of Denzel Ward, in a pretty good spot injury-wise. And I feel like, Greedy Williams came back in practice last week. He was not activated from IR. Now he'll get a second week of practice. Assuming no setbacks, I would expect him to be activated. And therefore, now your rotation at corner can be Newsome, Emerson, Williams, which obviously you miss Denzel Ward, but they have some depth there.
You brought up Garrett, still searching for that sack, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. We would notice anyway, right, that he hasn't had a sack in, I think it's 3 weeks. but we certainly would know. But it's certainly much more obvious because we've been talking about, the Clay Matthews official record, right? The 62, and Miles has been stuck at 61.5 since week 2, right? He got 2 sacks in the opener, 1 against the Jets, and then he's been shut out the last 2 games and obviously didn't play against the Falcons. So, it's 2 games in a row without a sack. You could throw in a 3rd game because he missed it, and we can argue whether or not how much of that's him, personal responsibility, 1 car accident. But it's not the end of the world when you go 2 games without a sack. But with a guy like Myles Garrett and the expectations that people have for him and he has for himself, it's certainly noticeable. I thought he came close a few times to getting Justin Herbert, who's a tough guy to sack. He'd only been sacked 4 times in the first 4 games. He just gets rid of the ball in a hurry. He's a good athlete back there. So I don't think it's not like Myles, to me, it's not like he disappeared. I saw him plenty of times during the course of the game. He just didn't make the big play that the Browns need him to make.
Yeah. I think if you listened last week, I think we broke the Chargers down pretty well. You had good insight on them, and I think we, talked about Herbert, talked about all the key components, and let's do that with New England now. 2-3 coming in. The Browns are favored by 3 last I saw. Patriots, let's see, they lost to the Dolphins, Packers, and Ravens, right? And they beat the Steelers and Lions. Thoughts on the Pats for another one in Cleveland this Sunday?
Yeah, I mean, they're a flawed team, right? They're not perfect. They're in a little bit of a, I don't know if it's rebuild is the right word, but it probably is. At the post-Tom Brady years, they've had changes on their coaching staff. No Josh McDaniels anymore. They got Matt Patricia, Joe Judge have their hands in the offense, and I know they've gotten a lot of criticism for that. But and Mac Jones gets hurt, their first-round pick from a year ago at quarterback, played well as a rookie. Then Brian Hoyer starts the game against Green Bay, not Sunday, the week before, and gets hurt, goes on IR. I think it's a concussion. And they bring in a rookie, Bailey Zappi, 4th-round pick out of Western Kentucky. Started his career at Houston Baptist, right? I don't know anything about this guy, but last night I watched the Sunday game against the Lions, and they won 29-0. And this kid looked composed, which I guess you should expect maybe from a Bill Belichick quarterback, even if he's a rookie who's not expected to play. But I was impressed with the kid. Now, they didn't ask him to make a bunch of tough throws. The Lions didn't do anything. So, they had the lead. There wasn't a whole lot of pressure situations. A lot of kind of easy reads for the quarterback to make, throw the ball deep down the sideline. You throw a hook over the middle. You run a screen. But he played well. And, Mac Jones has been practicing a little bit, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out this week. If Jones comes back, it kind of feels like the ankle injury is serious enough that he would miss another week. But I think you can't just say, hey, Bailey Zappi's playing the Browns, they're going to win this game, because I don't think it's that simple. And it's a Bill Belichick team, right? Like, you just can't get past that, especially when you flash back at last year. The Browns went into New England and got demolished. And a lot of the talk after the game, even from the Browns players, were how good the coaching was for New England and how they took advantage of all the things the Browns had done poorly earlier in the season. So obviously Belichick's got plenty of things to look at there when it comes to the Browns defense and things to exploit. But just from a roster standpoint, the receivers are Nelson Aguilar and Jacoby Myers. They got a couple tight ends, Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. They spent a bunch of money on those guys in free agency a year ago. Let me look, their running back, right? Ramondre Stevenson.
Harris is he's out, right?
Yeah, Damian Harris went on IR. I think he's out for sure. So Stevenson had a big game against the Lions. I think it was 160 yards, I want to say, somewhere in that ballpark. So they can run it. He's a physical runner, and we've talked about the poor Browns run defense. Obviously, that's the first thing you look for, is the Browns have to figure out a way to stop that. And then defensively, they got Matthew Judon, the pass rusher, had a big game last year against the Browns. Showed up again against the Lions with a forced fumble that they returned for a touchdown. The Lions kept going for it on fourth down, and part of that was, being aggressive. Part of it was they got behind and had to go for it. And I don't think the Patriots let him convert once. They were like 0 for 5 or 0 for 6, and that's just me watching the game and making notes going, oh my gosh, they're really good on fourth down. So that's something to watch. They have Mac Wilson, in the offseason trade for Chase Winovich. He's playing. He's listed as a starter on the depth chart. He shows up, in third down passing situations. Jabril Peppers is on their team. So they got some guys. I think Peppers. I'm looking at their depth chart. Yeah, there it is. Jabril Peppers. I knew I saw him. So they got some familiar guys. Their roster is not full of big name talented guys, but they're well coached and they have a handful of guys that are good players.
Yeah, I mean, normally when it's New England versus Detroit, you expect the New England win. No question. That shouldn't be shocking. But in this case, I thought they'd win probably, but the Lions offense has been, I mean, no pun intended, roaring. I mean, they have been scoring a ton of points. I was kind of surprised by the goose egg.
Yeah, no doubt. And yeah, the Lions had been scoring a bunch. And I think that speaks to Bill Belichick, and maybe it's not. Maybe it's too easy when they surprise people or they play a great game. It's go, oh my gosh, Belichick. But he's probably the greatest ever, or one of the greatest ever, certainly. And I think he deserves that kind of credit. And again, I flash back to last year, Chud. I remember watching that game and just thinking it felt like a mismatch, and it wasn't from a coaching standpoint. And that's not even a huge knock on Kevin Stefanski. That was more of a Joe Woods, where it felt like Belichick just had all the answers to what the Browns did defensively. And after that game, the Browns really turned it around. And that's where I give Joe Woods a lot of credit. So to me, when we talk about things to watch this week, Jacoby Brissett started his career against New England. He's obviously looking for a bounce back after that terrible interception against the Chargers. That's one thing. We talk about the run defense overall. Will the new guys play? Will they have any kind of impact? But then thirdly is this coaching situation, right? Because we know the heat, and I don't even want to say heat because that makes you think hot seat. We know the criticism that Joe Woods and Kevin Stefanski have received thus far this season. And they will be in the spotlight against Bill Belichick and his staff. And it's going to be interesting to see how they handle it, because they cannot afford to get out-coached on Sunday. And they cannot afford to let Bill Belichick exploit all their weaknesses. And it's going to be fascinating to watch, I think.
Yeah, no doubt. Belichick and try to take out Chubb. I mean, can you take Chubb out, or do you just try and just stop the run and make Brissett beat you?
Yeah.
To just let him run and then hope Brissett makes a mistake.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. You broke up for a second, but I heard you say, do they try to take away Nick Chubb? That's a great point. Do you try to take him away and let Jacoby Brissett beat you? My initial thought is yes, but I think it's impossible to do that. Like, I don't think you can just take Nick Chubb in this running game away. So if you're Bill Belichick, do you concede that and say, okay, let's make sure they don't beat us at the pass game? I don't know. I don't know how he goes into that. Maybe they put 9 guys on the line of scrimmage and say, okay, go beat us, Jacoby Brissett. They kind of did that last year with Baker Mayfield, and Baker couldn't do it. The run game feels even better this year. There's some injuries last year. You didn't have Chubb and Hunt together, I don't think, for that game, certainly for much of the season. But he's really good at scheming. Can he come up with the right scheme that frustrates Stefanski and Bill Callahan's run scheme? My thought is he can't. My thought is the Browns' run game is too good, but I don't want to undersell Bill Belichick. So that'll be interesting to see Chud. Can they at least maybe limit it early, where Stefanski gets out of his normal play calling rhythm and says, okay, I got to throw it here, and then the pressure flips to Brissett? That's going to be certainly. I've been focused more on the other side of the ball, but I think you have a really good point. That's going to be interesting to see how that goes.
Sure. Before we get to predictions, real quick note: Deshaun Watson back in the building, right?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, he returned Monday. He was allowed, as part of the suspension settlement, not allowed to practice, not allowed to attend practice or games, allowed to go to meetings, allowed to meet with Stefanski, coordinator Alex Van Pelt, quarterbacks coach Drew Petzing, can work out on his own with the strength staff. So yeah, he's back in the building. I think that's good. From Kevin Stefanski stressed the mental aspect of it. Right, he's been working out on his own. He's had a quarterback coach. He's been throwing to guys. But you lose touch with the playbook. You lose touch with the game plan because the coaches have not been allowed to have contact with him. Now he's back in the building. He can kind of see how the Browns prepare for a game. Do a deep dive into the game plan, which is big for his preparation for his return. Now he can practice again if everything stays on schedule. He can practice again November 14th, and then he'd be eligible to play December 4th in Houston.
Yeah. All right, you ready for predictions? You got anything else before we get to prediction?
No, I think we hit on it. No, I think we hit. The run defense. I mentioned, and I'm saying it again because I have it written down. The fact that they traded for Dion Jones and brought in Davison, the defensive tackle, I do think it speaks to the concerns inside the building and some of the pieces they have. And that's defensive tackle and linebacker. And those are the same concerns that I think observers and fans had entering the season. And then you lose Anthony Walker Jr., your middle linebacker. And the hope was for the Browns, Jacob Phillips would just step in and it would be a smooth transition. And it hasn't been. And, this isn't giving up necessarily on Jacob Phillips, but I think it is a realization and an acknowledgement from the team that he hasn't been good enough. And they really miss Anthony Walker Jr. And I think they hope Dion Jones, at some point, he's coming off shoulder surgery. He's been on IR the first 5 games. The hope is at some point he can help in that role because they just haven't been good enough. That front 7, specifically the middle, those 2 D tackles and those linebackers haven't been good enough the last 2 weeks.
All right, I'll go first on prediction.
Yep.
All right, so I'm 2-3 and you're 3-2, right? I think that's where we're at.
Yeah, because I picked the Chargers. Yeah. I stuck with the Chargers.
Yeah. Yes. All right. So I went with the Chargers too. So I'll go first. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. It's a game the Browns should win. They're the more talented team. They should win at home. I won't be surprised if the Browns win. I mean, they got to win this game. That said, I'm not going to predict them. I'm going to go Patriots for the Bill Belichick reason alone. I'm going to go that, Bill Belichick outcoaches the Browns, and I'm going to go with what I've seen so far this year. A crazy ending where something happens, the Browns lose by like 2 points. So I'm just going to – and I might change my mind as the week goes on. We're recording this Wednesday morning. I'm going to go 16-14 Patriots.
All right. I can't argue with a bunch of that, Chud. It's interesting. This is a tough game. The Browns could win any game. They could lose every game, right? Which makes predicting them very difficult. And yes, that's not just me trying to cover my own caboose. I think they're a tough team to predict because we talked about it. They're in every game. They get a chance to win every game. I'm going to predict the bounce back, right? They've lost 2 in a row. They're not going to lose 3 in a row. It's from here on out, it's probably one of the rare circumstances where I think the Browns have the quarterback advantage. Maybe that changes if Mac Jones plays. But even then, I don't think it's head and shoulders. It kind of flashes me back to the early season when the Browns played those 4 teams without stud quarterbacks. It's at home. That should help. I get the Bill Belichick factor. We've talked about that over and over. I just think that the Browns are going to bounce back and figure out a way to do it. They haven't been able to figure out a way the last couple of weeks. I think they figure out a way. I think they're kind of due. And I'm going 26-24. If it's 16-14, Chud, I'd be stunned by that. And the reason I say it is the Browns would have had to fix their defense. And if they fix their defense and still lose, the that would be tough to take for Browns fans. So I feel like it's going to be we're going to see some points. Bill Belichick will have some answers for that Browns defense. I think the Browns are going to be able to run the ball. But I'm going to say the Browns pull it out 26-24.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised at that. I just number one, the only thing I'll disagree with you on is when has the home factor really been a factor for the Browns? I mean, that's the only. I mean, right?
That's legit. I thought twice about before I said it. I mean, the fans are still there; they're still loud. It should be a factor.
Yeah, no doubt. The other thing too is, I guess I'm gonna just say, man, if the Patriots could stop that potent Lions offense to 0, I mean, that's why I guess I went lower scoring.
Yeah, I mean, that's not. I mean, it's not crazy. I don't know what the over/under is. It's got to be higher than 30, but it's probably less than 50. So it's probably You broke up, Chud. What do you got? 40 what?
42.5.
Okay. So a little closer to mine, but kind of in the middle. I just think it would be so Browns, right? For them to hold the Patriots to 16 points and still lose, right? Like that would follow kind of, oh my gosh, they found a new way to lose. I just think the Browns offense has been playing too well for that. But I wouldn't put anything past them, so you could be right. But
well, remember, we can change our mind. I always say that. I mean, we're on the spot on Wednesday here,
right?
Yeah,
and I thought about it last week. I really did. I thought about changing over the weekend with Garrett playing and then Clowney playing, and the Chargers didn't have Keenan Allen. Like I thought, man, it's kind of shaping up where the Browns could win, but I stuck with it because of Herbert, and he played great. I'm not sure he was a difference in the game. It was more the Chargers running game and the Browns' mistakes. But anyway, from my perspective, I was glad I stuck with it because I really thought about switching that pick.
Well, the way I'm looking at it right now is I'm not going to take credit for picking the Chargers to win because the Browns easily could have won that game. Just like I don't want anyone coming at me when I get it wrong this year because I've lost some picks that I should have won. Right. I mean, it goes both ways right now.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I'm just saying, like that. I feel like that with a lot of these picks is I don't feel great about it. Like some weeks you feel okay, I like this pick, and you can still be wrong. But there's plenty that I don't feel good about. It's still too early in the week for me to say whether or not how great I feel about this pick. By the time we get to Saturday or Sunday. But right now I'm going to pick the Browns bounce back. Yeah.
Hey, go Guardians. Let's get the next one against the Yankees and come back tied 1-1.
Yeah, it's a good thing. You've got to feel good about Bieber, right? Having Shane Bieber on the mound. Having said that, they got to figure out a way to score some runs because obviously they haven't done that in their first 3 postseason games here. Lucky to win those 2 that they did. Not lucky, but to score 2 and 1 and win both games. They're gonna have to figure out a way to manufacture some runs here.
Well, it's funny, the narrative, right? Like our whole conversation is much different, not entirely, but much different if Cade York hits that field goal, right?
Yep.
Well, in the Guardians case, if they lose that series, we're having off season talking about how they can't score and the offense died, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just the narrative, but you're right. They can't score 1 or 2 runs and beat the Yankees. They got to find some offense.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, maybe Bieber can do it, right? Maybe they can win a 2-1 game with Bieber. But that's not. I don't think that's sustainable. But that's why they need Bieber to have a great outing for sure.
So, yeah, no doubt.
Yep, looking forward to that. Chud, thanks.
All right, that's it for me.
Yeah, I appreciate it, bud. Thanks as always. I know it's a busy week for both of us. So I'm glad we were able to get this in. Thanks everybody for listening. Again, this has been another episode of the Zone Coverage Podcast, and you can read all my work at brownzone.com. Thanks.